now call Deputy Joan Collins. 8 minutes.
Thank you, last count caller. It's following on from Deputy Daly. I think it has to be registered in the Dáil. It's been made many times. That's an absolute disgrace that six governments before this have failed to legislate on X. This government has not exactly been enthusiastic bringing forward legislation. The expert group, in my opinion, was a stalling measure, and it's only the tragic death of a woman in Galway and the demand from the now majority of people in Ireland for action which has brought forward and which has led to a grudging acceptance of this government to take action. Irish society has changed dramatically in the last 20 years. We know that. Those attempting to stem the tide of a more liberal, more human, more secular and more tolerant society will have to accept the fact we live in the 21st century. This is the fourth review group calling for legislation. The Labour Party should now take the opportunity to begin that process, as Deputy Daly has said. This is an opportunity which doctors, eminent doctors, have stated quite clearly over the last number of weeks, say they need legislation for. The recent article by Peter Boylan, who makes a point about when can they confidently say that they can intervene to save the life of a mother. If it's 50-50, if it's unequivocal, they're in a very difficult position and they need the legislation to protect them in that situation. The claim that there is no need for any action because we have one of the safest records for women in the world in maternity hospitals. It's true to a point. We have a very good record, but unfortunately the anti-abortion lobby uses very misleading figures on this and other issues. They persistently use a figure from the CSO, which underestimates by half the official maternal death rate. The Maternal Death Inquiry Ireland, funded by the HSE, gives a much more accurate figure, which doubles that figure. It's nearly closer to Britain at that point. On the issue of suicide and abortion, the anti-abortion group are deliberately trying to distract the discussion away from the real issues. On the radio yesterday, Anthony McCarthy, the perinatal psychiatrist, said quite clearly, while the risk of suicide is small, it is nonetheless real and it must be addressed. So that is the issue. This is the view of two Irish eminent psychiatrists, and it's a very serious issue. And we have to remember, this was the core of the X case. It was a young 14-year-old girl raped and made pregnant who was denied the right to travel to Britain to have an abortion. And it was on the basis of suicide that right was given. It took the Supreme Court under pressure from a huge movement that took the government of the day off the hook. Rather than act by introducing legislation, successive governments twice attempted to overturn the Supreme Court decision by referenda. Both referenda were defeated. The people have spoken and upheld that decision. There has been an attempt by anti-abortion lobby group to mislead on the issue of arguing that abortion is a contribution to mental health problems. This has nothing to do with the X case, but I want to address an important point on this. Last year in the UK, a project commissioned by the Academy of Medical Royal Colleges undertook a comprehensive review, and the key conclusion was that the mental health outcome for women who have an abortion is the same for those who go on to have a baby. The American Psychological Association did a similar survey, and they found no evidence that having a single abortion causes mental health problems. Unbiased as opposed to those who have a clear anti-abortion stance, reports have found there is no evidence that women post-abortion are at risk of increased risk of suicide, but there is evidence that suicide is associated with unwanted pregnancies where abortion is not available. I'm proud to be associated with this bill. Deputy Daly has gone through it in detail. I'm not going to repeat it, but I will appeal to the Labour deputies that this bill proposes the abolition of Article 58 of the 1861 Non-Fatal Offences Against the Persons Act. And this is one of the most draconian, as you know, draconian Victorian piece of legislation, but that provides that woman seeking to procure or bring on a miscarriage herself can be jailed for life, and any person assisting in that procurement of a miscarriage can be subjected to jail for up to 5 years. This similar Act was repealed in India in 1971. The report of the expert group has referred to this piece of legislation would be a significant. The report from the expert group has referred to this piece of legislation in relation to their points. They say the court emphasised The legal uncertainty caused by current provisions arises from the fact that the 1861 Act has not been amended or clarified following the adoption of Article 43(3) of the Constitution. The judgment stated that criminal provisions still in force would have a significant chilling effect on both women and doctors during the medical consultation process because of the risk for both parties of a criminal conviction and imprisonment. It's really important that this piece of legislation is dealt with. I want to come back to the point that Irish society has changed fundamentally. The United Left Alliance is committed to campaigning alongside all those who now support this position, where issues in relation to the health of women should not be a matter for the Constitution, but a matter to be discussed between woman and her doctor. Indeed, opinion polls evidence say that. The YouGov opinion poll evidence in 2010 where it particularly says 8 out of 10 respondents, 78% agree that termination of pregnancy should be permitted if the pregnancy is a result of sexual abuse, rape or incest. And 2/3 of respondents, 62%, agree that termination of pregnancy should be permitted if there is evidence of profound fetal abnormality. We will be campaigning for repeal of the 8th Amendment, but that is no justification for not taking immediate action. As Eamon Gilmore said, inaction is not an option. Voting this bill starts the legislative process that should start the process. I'm hoping that the Labour Party members will support this bill.